Arch Manning for Heisman. I just have to say that for the algorithm, so you'll click on this video. We will get into that later. Welcome into Inside Texas Football. This is episode 5 of On the Horn. I'm your host, James Hayden, live again from my little brother's room in my parents' house in a chilly Austin, Texas. All the snow has melted. I know we are technically in the off season, but as the Apostle Paul says, we preach the word in and out of the season, and that is what we're going to do tonight, folks. Thank you for joining us. We've got a loaded show for you tonight. We're going to talk, finally, for the last time, about the 2024 season. Put that to bed, give my final takeaways, open up the phone line so you guys can call in and give your takeaways, and really look back on this season, reflect sort of post-mortem what we think now that the emotions have settled, and just sort of things that are good growing points for the future and how we'll look at this year in 5 years, if Texas goes on to win a national title and achieve their goals. And then we're going to get into the 2025 win total. That stuff has been going out. Texas, some people think the bar's a little low from the books. The guys in Vegas putting the number there for Texas's win total in 2025. And with that, we'll look at the way too early top 25 from our friends at On3 and their top 25 quarterbacks list that they released today. I've got some gripes with that, some of my opinions. Obviously, Arch Manning makes an appearance on there. And then from there, we will get into the Heisman odds and whatnot. To start out, the 2024 season takeaways. Now that the calendar has officially turned into 2025, the season ended in Dallas, not in the fashion that Texas fans may have wanted, but it is over. It was a great year for a lot of reasons. And, in the end, they did come up short. I think 2024, it's safe to say that Texas isn't, back. As much as I like to say that, Texas is back, folks. It's great for the engagement on social media, which if you do not follow us on Instagram and Twitter, make sure to follow Inside Texas. But as much as I love saying Texas is back, whenever they'd be rated number 1, I'd make a graphic and that'd be the caption. It always worked. People love that. Thanks to Joe Tessitore saying that in the 2016 Texas Notre Dame game. But I wouldn't say Texas is back. I would say, Texas is here now, right? They were number 1 for multiple weeks this season to start, which is a huge accomplishment. I know it doesn't mean anything in reality. You're number 1. What does that really mean? In the middle of the season, nobody actually cares if you're number 1. But Texas being number 1 for the first time since 2008 is a pretty huge deal when you think back to where they had been in the last, decade and change. Some of the toxic years, the culture looked like it was irreparable at times. I mean, we remember famously Kirk Herbstreit on College Game Day, looked at the camera, deadpan, and said, Texas it's a poisoned culture. Austin, Texas is toxic. It seemed like, from Charlie Strong to Tom Herman, God rest their souls, they're still with us. Just, they haven't been heard of since they left Austin in a lot of ways. But, good guys, but it just didn't work out for whatever reason. They couldn't just get the culture to work. And, there's a lot of pressure here. But to say that where they were when they lost to Kansas in 2016 and then Charlie Strong was let go and then losing to Kansas in the first year of Steve Sarkisian, to say that then they would be ranked number 1 just, a couple years later is really an astonishing thing and a great thing for Texas. And while they were number 1 for a few weeks, we know that didn't last. We know what happened, but they finished the season number 4. That poll came out. The final AP poll, Texas was number 4. I know some people were talking about how they thought Texas should have been ahead of Oregon and, 4 wasn't high enough, or we were actually the number 2 team in the country behind Ohio State. It's fun to bicker about that stuff. And that's pretty much what we'll be doing all off season, is talking about shoulda, coulda, woulda and theoreticals and stuff. But they were ranked number 4, and that is a serious accomplishment in its own right. That's back-to-back seasons ranked in the top 5. I'm not sure how many people really thought of that, as much as we were upset about the Ohio State loss. It's back-to-back seasons finishing in the top 5. And that's for the first time since 08-09. And we all know how great those years were, going from a Fiesta Bowl to then the national championship runner-up in 2009 season, Colt McCoy's last year. So, I mean, that's great to finish the year ranked 4th. I know the standard is the standard, as Steve Sarkisian says, but the standard at Texas is, 12 win seasons, 13 win seasons, and you're not always going to finish on a national title. I think we know that what it means at Texas to be back, to beat Texas, and what the standard is in Austin is simply being in contention, being talked about every single year. And that is the case now with Texas, with Georgia, with Ohio State, with Alabama, and Texas is right back there with those guys, which is great, right? And there was a lot of things this year that you were seeing, graphics. I loved making the graphics over on the social media. First time ranked number 1 since 08, first time, number 1 recruiting class since 08. Well, it's a lot of stuff first since, 15 years ago. And, those are things that you can't, just glance over. Those are major accomplishments for Texas. So, while we're talking about those things and the bigger picture, that being great, getting into specifics, some takeaways from the year. I think the offense, we were just talking, Texas Homer and I, we're just talking before we hopped on air, and we're talking about the receiver room and stuff like that. If we think Wingo will take a big step, and DeAndre Moore Jr., those guys had good seasons in their own right. DeAndre Moore was in his sophomore year, but Ryan Wingo was a true freshman, and he had almost 500 yards. He had a couple TDs to go with that. But DeAndre Moore Jr. Had almost 500 yards as well, and he had 7 TDs. Second on the team in receiving TDs, which is a major accomplishment. And those are 2 guys that are coming back. So we know the receiver room will be loaded. So that's a great takeaway to see your young guys putting in work, having statistical results, and seeing their achievements. And the same thing goes with Trey Wisner, who will be back. Jared Gibson got some run early on in the year. Those are guys, it's great to see them performing and coming back. And I think the main story of 2024 for me was the defense. I mean, it's got to be the defense. Everybody said, the defense played at a championship caliber. That was a championship defense. Unfortunately, the team wasn't able to win the championship, obviously. But that defense was one of the best we've seen, I think, since 2009. Probably. I was not paying as much attention to secondaries and schemes and zone coverage and stuff like that. And, linebacker play when I was like 8 years old, but so in my opinion, that's the best defense I've seen in, the lifetime that I've had, just being around since the 2000s. But this defense was loaded. I mean, last year's defense was great, but the secondary obviously was a little lackluster, as we know, with the Sugar Bowl performance. Yeah, but this, I think, was the best defense that I remember. Obviously, you guys are going to tell me how young I am, and, I got to remember the 2005 defense and stuff like that. I was a little too young to know that one. But, yeah, I mean, this defense was great. How special it is that, you had a defense go from being ranked in the 80s in secondary pass yards per game, the secondary, then going to being, I believe it was second or first in yards per pass, number 7 in pass yards per game. So this defense was just an all-time caliber defense, something I hope that we remember, and if in a couple years, God willing, Texas does win a national title with Arch Manning, I'll knock on wood for that. There's John Gruden says, knock on wood if you're with me. But yeah, I mean, if they do go on to win a title, you forget about some of these teams. I think people probably forget about some of those early Mac Brown teams before they won it, right? Or, Colt McCoy's 10-3 teams. You don't remember those teams as much as the teams that make it to the national title. But I think these couple years need to be remembered, specifically this one on the defensive side of the ball, because just how historic it was for Texas to be an elite defense again. I mean, we forget the Big 12, that the land of the shootouts, which I love the Big 12. I'm a Baylor graduate. Love the shootouts. It's all fun to watch. I love that stuff growing up, seeing those high scoring games. But Texas, really, what were the talking points from people outside of Austin? Oh, you're not going to be able to play with these SEC defenses. You're not going to be able to, handle the physicality. How will they bow up? Run game, against SEC fronts. Texas isn't going to be able to stop anybody. But we saw that was not the case, right? Texas's defense showed that all those recruiting rankings could translate to real results. And we know that Texas has never been short of talent, but the defensive line being as good as it was this year, for example, we're going to miss a lot of those guys, Alfred Collins, Barron Sorrell, and whatnot. But, the young guys getting after it, we saw Colin Simmons lead the team in sacks. Like, that is a physical presence, a specimen, a guy you would see like a Will Anderson Jr., like a Dallas Turner at Alabama. Now that guy's at Texas, and it's great to see that again. Looking back in the days of the Yacho brothers and Brian Arapco, it's really cool to see Texas finally have those dudes again. Well, not that they didn't have those dudes. Malik Jefferson was great. There was good pass rushers in those down years, but I mean, to see those guys perform and play at that level that we know that Texas's athletes are capable of, and the talent level that Texas has, it was great to see them execute like that. And just seeing the statistical payoff on that end, seeing Texas be top 5 in points per game, 15 points per game, number 2, 283 yards per game, number 4, 4.2 yards per play. That's number 2 in the country. They were number 3 in red zone defense. I mean, we can keep going, right? Like, this was a defense that was top 5 in so many statistical categories, things that you have not seen Texas be top 5 in so long. So, I mean, the defense was my biggest takeaway. I can keep ranting about this for 10 more minutes. I'm a bit of a yapper. That's why I want to do this for a living. But, yeah, feel free to call in, guys, if you want to give your biggest takeaways from the season. Would love to hear what you guys have to say on the 2024 season as we kind of put a bow on it and move fully forward into off-season mode and looking towards the spring game and all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, a couple more things I just thought of from 2024 as I give the last little bit of my thoughts on this and let you guys get in here and give your opinions. Yeah, Simmons and Hill, obviously, those guys are just dudes. That's awesome. Those guys had 9 and 8 sacks respectively. They're both back. I mean, that's going to be a terrifying front seven next year for anybody coming into DKR. And Anthony Hill had 113 tackles, which that is awesome to go along with 8 sacks. Trey Moore, we know he's coming back. That's a huge transfer from last year. He didn't really come on until the back half of the year. But, yeah, he got 5.5 sacks down the stretch. Took him about 6 6 games, half the season probably, until he got a sack. That was a big talking point early on in the season. You remember the people were talking about the defense not getting sacks. And then in the end, they were putting up numbers that front seven was, and those edges were performing. Yeah, and then Michael Taft, I mean, how big of a story it is for him to be second in tackles. He had 78 tackles. To think coming into the season, there were still people on the Inside Texas, comments in the live streams. People were still saying, oh, he's more story than substance. How about Michael Taft having 78 tackles? He had 2 interceptions. I mean, now it went from Michael Taft being the walk-on to Michael Taft being the All-American. That's another guy who's coming back. So, I mean, those were just some of my points I wanted to make on the 2024 season. Mostly defense, because that was the story, was the defense. I think will be what we will remember in years to come, is how this defense and just this year really set up Texas for the future, the number 1 recruiting class, all that stuff. Yeah, I mean, I just fully think Texas has arrived back to the upper echelon of college football where we were, so desperately waiting for them to get to. So, yeah, I mean, I think 2024, I put it as a successful season. That's a top 10 Texas season, in my opinion. 13 wins for the first time since 2009. I know it was in 16 games, but that's modern college football. You play an NFL schedule now, but still 13 wins. Finish the season ranked 4th. I think it was a successful season, in my opinion. I'll always cherish this group because, also partially because it's my first season covering the sport. But yeah, I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about 2024. We can go ahead and bring in our first caller here and see what they've got to say for us. Hey, Jackson, can you hear me?
I can.
What do you got for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with a lot of things you said. We can't get too disappointed. Like you said, we can't win a national championship every year. And the last 2 years, we were 1 play away both years from the title game. In terms of, like I said, the defense, elite unit. I can't even imagine what it could have been like if you could have had the 24 defense with a 23 offense.
Yeah,
that would have been ideal. Obviously, that's not the case. And then with what you were saying about next year, Like you said, Colin Simmons, probably my favorite player on the team right now. I think he's going to absolutely explode. Like the motor and work ethic that he has is unmatched on the team. And like I think there's a chance he's going to get like a Micah Parsons treatment next year. Just get held every play pretty much. And then
yeah, for sure. I mean, if you remember him coming out of high school, like all those
yeah,
clips going viral of him just being, people were like, he's a man in a boy's body. Like he was just a freak from the beginning. Like that
yeah,
is a good comp. Like, I mean, you could see it. Shoot, he wears number 11 for a reason. But yeah, you could see him just go completely off. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets double-digit sacks next year.
And the other guy on the line, I think there's a chance that Justice Terry actually starts a few games next year. Flipped to Texas last second from Georgia, and if you watch his high school tape, you'll be blown away. Like you'll be like, this is a man amongst boys. So I'm really excited about the defense next year, and then with the offense, you make a good point about we have a lot of talent in the wide receiver room, but I think that's a way to, besides the healthiness of Quinn. That was the biggest difference, in my opinion, in the 23 and the 24 offense was the experience of the receivers. And once again, we're going to have an inexperienced group of receivers, but a lot of talent. And I think with a more diverse offense with a mobile quarterback like Arch, they're primed to succeed.
Yeah, I mean, that is a point I always would make when people would dog on Quinn this year is like, this is not 2023's receiving core. And to dream about having the 2024 or 2023 offense with the 2024 defense. I mean, I would think about that a lot of times because like, you can't just lose guys like AD Mitchell and Xavier Worthy.
Yeah.
And expect to just like, snap your fingers and you're going to have the same level of production. We were shocked at how good Matthew Golden was. And you got Isaiah Bond hurt. But I do think, like while 2025 will be a bit of unknown, is you've also got Ryan Wingo will be coming back for his second year when he had serious production. DeAndre Moore having 7 touchdowns, like that's nothing to slouch at, and he'll be back he'll be a junior next year. So I mean, there's a lot of Khalil Lockett coming in and Jamie French. Like there's a couple 5 stars that'll be coming in who might make an immediate impact. It'll be interesting to see, but I definitely
for sure. I mean, with all the inexperience, like there should be a lot of competition this spring and the summer. So it should be exciting to see what the depth chart looks like come August.
Hey, well, thanks for calling in, Jackson. Appreciate your take.
Appreciate you having me.
Yep. All right. So yeah, as we're talking about a lot of the unknowns of 2025, it seems like Sark is going to have to not necessarily rebuild, but reload, so to speak. And we know that Texas is now in that point where they can just fix things right back up and be right where they started. But it's safe to say we might have to remodel a little bit. Shout out to our boys from Luxe Kitchen and Remodeling.
This video is brought to you by Luxe Kitchen and Bath. Luxe has been offering high-end kitchen and bathroom remodels for 3 generations throughout the greater Austin area. With 5-star review after 5-star review on Google and Facebook, and an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau, you can put your faith in Luxe Kitchen and Bath's award-winning designers and skilled craftspeople to bring to life that dream vision of your special home. But that's not all. Luxe's all-star team provides full remodels, large additions, and even commercial build-outs as well. So call Luxe Kitchen and Bath at 833-358-LUXE today. Or visit luxekitchenbath.com to discover where quality meets luxury and begin the process of transforming your home. Get a free quote today by calling 833-358-LUXE. That's L-U-X-E. Or by visiting luxekitchenbath.com. Link in the description.
Thank you, LC, for that. Hope that was a smooth transition with the kitchen remodel there. But we've got one more caller to give their 2024 takeaways as we wrap up this season and get focused on 2025. Gonna go ahead and bring Dylan in here. Dylan, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. What do you got for me?
I'm really proud of this 2024 season as well. This is by far the best Texas defense I've seen, at least in the past 19, 20 years. Extremely physical, hard-nosed team in my eyes. But I think the big question is next year, is the defense and offensive line going to have that same intensity? I know the offensive line down the long stretch kind of was dealing with injuries and You could see some of their weaknesses in their big games against like Georgia, and they played pretty well against Ohio State. But with a lot of the big names leaving, I'm just wondering how they're going to refill those positions. And I'm also curious about how Cedric Baxter is going to look coming off of the ACL tear.
Yeah, I mean CJ Baxter. I mean he's a young guy, and like people forget the number one athlete, or I mean number one running back in his class in 2023. I mean, I think when you're that young coming off an ACL, we've seen people bounce back off of ACLs now. It's you never want to take that for granted, but it does seem like now, thanks to modern medicine and rehab, that I would expect Baxter to at least, it might be slow to start, but unfortunately we started in Columbus, Ohio in that first game, but I would expect CJ Baxter to at least get back to 90% of what he was. And what he was in 2023 was, he was behind Jonathan and Brooks, but when he became running back number one, was a really good player. I think Baxter will get back to full form. He's also had a lot of time off. The O-line, though, that is a good point. We were actually just talking about that before we got on air. There's a lot of unknowns there, but DJ Campbell came back, thankfully. Trevor Goosby's gotten a lot of run. Baker, we think, might get in. But, yeah, the O-line is one of those things you just don't really know yet. But, with a group like Texas and the recruits that Texas gets now, thankfully, you go 2-3 deep at those sort of positions. And they've got big dudes. Like, there's no shortage of big guys. They've got some big recruits coming in. Nick Brooks is a big guy coming in. He was a 4-star, like 6'7" guy from Georgia. He's a huge O-lineman. I mean, I think you'll have depth there. It might be a little tough starting on the road in Columbus for that O-line. But, yeah, I mean, we didn't know how good Cam Williams was going to be this year, and then he ended up playing himself into a first-round pick. I mean, you're always going to have those sort of specimens up front for Texas, those big boys.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I know in the 22-23 class, they really stacked up, and Kyle Flood's really got those guys cooking. So I'm not too worried about that. I am worried about the interior defensive line, though.
Yeah.
Like going against teams like Ohio State and especially week 1. I'm not sure how these younger guys are going to handle that in Columbus. Like their first college playing time is against number 1 or number 2 ranked team in the country. But yeah, I know Jackson, the previous caller, said Justice Terry, he wouldn't be surprised if Justice Terry got some snaps, and that's what I'm thinking, at least. I mean, I don't really know who else since AC and Brockton left.
Yeah, I mean, Justice Terry will probably get some run. They brought in a couple transfers, that big dude from Purdue.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things like you're not going to know about a ton about the D tackles until we get closer to the season, most likely. But yeah, I mean, we were big on Vernon Broughton coming into the season, then he sort of popped off, and a lot of people didn't know a ton about Vernon Broughton because he was behind Murphy and Sweat. So I think it's kind of same thing as O-line. Like Texas they're in a position where they're never going to be short of big bodies, and you're going to have like guys like Justice Terry as a defensive tackle. Like it's not super hard to play as a freshman, at least getting reps and whatnot. And he has the size, like, he's a man amongst boys. So like 5-star for a reason. I think he could have an impact. The D line will be interesting to watch, but then you've also got, dudes like Ethan Burke coming back. Like you've got Vosick. I should know these guys. They're Westlake kids. But you've got Vosick coming back. So like the edges will be great. Trey Moore's obviously back. The linebacker core will be good. I think that front seven will still be really good. Honestly, might be better against the run, because that was one area where they weren't super elite this year, was against the run. But yeah, I look forward to it. I think Texas is always going to be super loaded up front, and the D-line and O-line should be interesting. But that's one of those things, is like we said, opening against Ohio State is tough because chemistry is huge with these offensive and defensive line units. Is kind of what you need is reps.
Yeah, for sure. I do think, though, our pass rush is going to be better this year, just because no one's really leaving. Colin Simmons is coming back. I think Ethan Burke is going to take a huge step.
Yeah,
I know he played really well last season, but I think this season he's really going to come into his own and make a statement. But yeah, I'm excited. For sure.
Yeah, dude, I think Trey Moore should be better this year. Like he put up 5.5 sacks, and I don't think he had a sack in the first like 5 or 6 games. So like he really came on down the stretch, and he was great against the run. Like Texas's edges should be great next year, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, Dylan, thanks for calling in, man.
Yeah, for sure, man.
All right, we got one more coming in with their Texas takeaways, and then we will move on to 2025. Bubba, can you hear me?
How's it going?
Good, man. How are you doing? You got some 2024 takeaways for the Texas season?
Yeah, man. I mean, you're a big Sark guy, aren't you?
Yeah, dude. We love Sark at Inside Texas.
Man, I couldn't disagree with you more.
Why do you not like Sark?
I mean, it's something about him. He doesn't fit in with the SEC head coaches. And,
yeah, but I mean, people say Texas doesn't fit in with the SEC as a whole.
I mean, y'all are definitely closer than your coach. I think all right, first off, he needs to give up play calling, but also he needs to give up that little faux hawk he has. He looks like a damn hipster.
You don't think he's got an SEC haircut?
No. I mean, maybe it'd help if he'd pack a lip in every now and then. Maybe I'd get behind him more, but he needs to figure his haircut out, first off. Also, the play calling, he's got to give that up like Ryan Day did.
Yeah, I mean, there are some equivalents. I don't know on the hair topic, but people have mentioned the Ryan Day, Chip Kelly thing, letting Chip Kelly call plays. I mean, I said after the Ohio State game, I think let's see how these next years go with Arch Manning and see if his offense comes more into flow. Because obviously the offense was a problem down the stretch. They couldn't finish in the red zone. We don't want to repeat ourselves 100 times. But, yeah, I mean, we'll see how the next couple of years go. He might want to bring in an offensive coordinator. But, yeah, on the topic of Texas not fitting into the SEC or Sark not being an SEC type of coach, I mean, he's a West Coast guy. He went to BYU. He's probably not the most cookie-cutter SEC coach. I think he's more Pete Carroll than Nick Saban. He came from USC. I'm curious though, Bubba, who are you a fan of? You a Texas fan?
And I gotta say, I'm an Auburn fan first and foremost. Hugh. Hey.
Oh, is Hugh Freeze? Is that a?
He's a model character for the SEC. I love him. I also love Kirby, even though he's got to get his players figured out too. But you know what? I will say one thing about Sark is I do admire that he turned down all NFL offers, declined to meet with anyone in the NFL. So I like that about him at least.
Yeah, see, he's a college man. He's an SEC man through and through. He's loyal to Texas. You got to respect that. I mean, I would say Hugh Freeze he's about as SEC as it gets. I'll give you that one, and Kirby too. But hey, what Sark is doing is working for us. So to each their own.
Yeah, man, for sure. All right, that's all I had. Thank you.
Thanks for calling in, Bubba. All right. Yeah, that was interesting. I'm curious, what do you guys think of Sark's mohawk? Yeah, I think it's kind of cool. Not a lot of dads are ripping the mohawks these days. But yeah, Sark may not be an SEC guy to his point, but he certainly has SEC athletes and he's gotten SEC results. That's for sure. I mean, shoot, they went to the Sark is a trendsetter, whatever. Exactly. Hey, most of these coaches are losing their hair. I don't know. I haven't seen Hugh Freeze without a visor on. No offense to Bubba, but I'm not sure he's holding on to all his hair. But yeah, I mean, Sark went to the SEC title in year one. So it's more than you can say for Auburn and a lot of SEC schools, especially our friends a little north of here. Well, both of them, A&M and OU. So, yeah, going next as we got our last little takeaway. We went a little off track there, but the 2025 win totals came out. I don't know if you guys saw that from FanDuel, some sports books dropped their win totals for 2025. They had Texas at 9.5 going into 2025. Now, I think 9.5 is a great line. I mean, that's just a fun line because if you look at that schedule, they go at Georgia. They go at Ohio State. Then they have to go to the Swamp. They got to play OU, obviously, who we expect to be better. They have A&M at home, which, I mean, we know going into Kyle Fields is easy as playing them at home. As much as they might play power and get hyped up on the intro, they get pretty quiet after the game starts. And then they've got Arkansas at home too. So, I mean, that's kind of it's an interesting slot to peg them at 9.5 because – I'm sort of in that 10-2 projection when they have a schedule going at Georgia, at Ohio State. But that is also you're projecting that Georgia and Ohio State are going to be Georgia and Ohio State of this year and the past couple, right? But Texas is also a relatively unknown team. Now, next year, I think 10-2 is kind of the floor, in my opinion. I think we'll see, probably a bit of struggle walking into Columbus, year one of Arch. That's going to be hard. I'm not going to go ahead and say we're winning that game yet. That's one we'll have to look at as we get closer to it. But I'd love to hear what you guys think. If you want to call in, the win total over under is 9.5. So if you want to give your projection, hey, if you think that's free money, God bless you. I don't get into that stuff. I don't think I legally can tell you that, since unfortunately we're not allowed to bet in Texas yet. What happened to freedom? Yeah, I would love to, but yeah, over under. It's fun to speculate. 9.5 right now. I'm personally in the opinion, I think that Texas will probably go about 10-2 next year. But to be fair, I thought they were going to go 10-2 this past year. I didn't think they were going to be able to rebuild from 2023 and immediately go back to being elite. But that's kind of what we were talking about with the defensive line, the offensive line, is Texas is now in a position where you can just go year over year and have those kind of results. Like, I really don't see this team being worse than 10-2. Now that's me just saying that, and that could be feeling, that could be roster, just looking at the roster, but not knowing who's going to play like what. But I just think the way Texas is, the way the program is, how it is run now, it's just 10 wins is the floor now. It's similar to where Mac Brown, when he was hitting his stride, what did he win? 10 games, 11 seasons in a row. I mean, I'm just going off the dome on that one. Correct me if I'm wrong. But, I mean, shoot, in the late 90s to the late 2000s, Mac won 10 games at least every single year, right? And then those better years were, 12 wins, 13 wins. That's kind of where it feels like Sark is at right now, where he's hitting his stride. Because honestly, after 2023, that kind of just popped out of nowhere. How many years have Texas fans said, this is the year, this is the year, this is the year? And then finally, 2023, they pop 12-1, go to the playoff, finish 12-2. And then you're losing A.D. Mitchell, as we were talking about earlier. You're losing Xavier Worthy. I have personally, and that was, maybe the doubt in me that I've just seen so many bad years in recent years, believing that they could just rebuild like that, like in Ohio State. Because now think about when you think of Georgia and Kirby Smart, or even Ryan Day, for all of his faults and detractors. He is a national champion, technically, thanks to the 12-team playoff. We love modern college football. But, as for all their doubters, it's still like you're just expecting Ohio State to just be a top 4 team. Same with Georgia. And it feels like that's what Texas is at now, where you can just think, oh, Sark will figure it out. PK will figure it out specifically. I mean, I think he is the best defensive coordinator in college football now. And we know how great of an impact coordinators have and having a great staff can have. Because look at Notre Dame. They had one of the best staffs in the country. You have Mike Denbrock, the OC, coming from LSU. And then you had Al Golden. He just left and went to the NFL for the Bengals. But I think that PK is probably the best defensive coordinator in the country, right? And a staff can make all the difference. Notre Dame had one 5-star that made it all the way to the national title. So I think when you've got a coach like Sark, a culture that Sark has, the just overall environment that Texas has, and then a defensive mastermind like PK, as Jade Barron has called him 10 times over, he's a genius. I agree with Jade. I don't think anybody's going to disagree with that. I mean, PK put up just amazing numbers with Texas this year that we hadn't seen in years. But yeah, I mean, I'm personally, I think 10-2 is my projection. Would love to hear your guys' if you want to comment or call in and give your projection for next year. 9.5 wins is again the over-under. I'm personally of the belief that I think year 2 of Arch Manning is when you're going to make your title run, because as Texas Homer and I were talking on over the shoot and in the lobby before we loaded in for the show, we were talking about next year, just a lot of unknowns, right? And obviously CJ Baxter coming off of injury. Ryan Wingo, is he going to become an elite guy? Is he going to have a Matthew Golden type year? Who's going to be, that star receiver? How many weapons does Arch have? How good is Arch, right? It's unknown. So I personally think year 2, when Wingo's an upperclassman, maybe DeAndre Moore comes back. Who knows who comes back? And then just, Anthony Hill, Colin Simmons in their junior years, when they're upperclassmen. God only knows how much of studs those guys are going to be. But yeah, I mean, I think year 2 of Arch is where you're making your title push. But yeah, I mean, hey, Archie Manning himself, the grandpa Manning, he said he hopes he plays 3 years at UT. Let's hope he's right on that one. But he also did say he wants him to get drafted by the Cowboys. So maybe grandpa doesn't always know best, but let's hope he's right about the 3 years at UT thing. I do think that you're going to see a real title push in that second year of Arch as a starter. Yeah, so 10-2 is my projection. Tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me if I'm right. We're going to go ahead and bring on another caller here, a regular at this point. Here we go. My buddy Johnny here.
Yo, what's going on, James?
Hey, man. Good to have you on again. So what do you got on the 2025 projections, the over-under of 9.5 win total? What do you think about that?
I think I'm looking at the schedule right now. I think it's actually a pretty good line. We were talking a little bit in the pre-show about, kind of the schedule and where you're going, right? So you're going to the Shoe, you go to the Swamp, you go to Athens. I think the reason why the win total is a little bit lower, because last year I remember betting, like I said, if we're in Texas, I don't condone this. So I was in the state.
Hey, you're in California, dude. You can do whatever you want.
We don't allow that either, man.
Y'all can't bet in California?
We can't bet. Yeah, no one can bet. So
where's the freedom in this country, man?
I know, man. Come on, let a kid gamble, man. But so I was in New York when I placed this bet. But last year the win total was 10.5, and I think that's why you see a little bit of a difference this year, because like you were saying, there's a lot more uncertainty this year, right? Like you're going into year 4 of Quinn last year, like the entire offensive line's back. This year you have a new quarterback. You don't really know where CJ Baxter is health-wise. Basically, the entire line's new. But I think when you look at some of the bright side of things, right? Like you look at, yes, the line was good this year. I think they were like the Joe Moore Award finalists or something. But yeah, I think they had a lot of issues blocking up front. And you saw when Gooseby came in during the A&M game, right? Like Wisner went off for like almost 200 yards. So I don't think uncertainty is not necessarily a bad thing. I do think
that could be potential to be great, because you don't really know.
Yeah, like you don't know what their potential is. So it's not like you just don't know. It's not like a good or a bad thing. But what we did see from like what we saw this year, I think there's some really good flashes. So I do think that they make the over. It is like minus 200, so it's not like super even of a line, but I do think that they definitely cover the over there. I think they actually go 11-1.
Yeah. I mean, hey, that would follow the trend. That'd be 3 years in a row of that. And last year, what you're saying, I did the exact same thing last year before I even started this job. Just as a lowly college kid, I remember looking at that line at 10.5, and I was like, I thought they were going 10-2 last year, and then they went 11-1 again in the regular season. So I mean, because I think that's just the pessimist in me, because you see enough bad years of Texas football. I at this point vaguely remember when they were really elite with Colt McCoy. So I was like, I looked at the schedule this year and I was like, 10-2, because I think I don't know, maybe I'm not the only one. It's like, it's not as bad as battered Aggie syndrome, but, I think when you grow up around Texas, if you're in this kind of, early 20s generation or college age, you remember mostly not great years. So you kind of have that
days, man.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of have that anxious pit in your chest. Like I was like worried about them beating Michigan this year. And then we all know what happened there. And I was worried about the A&M game, and then we really know what happened there. So, I mean, I hope you're right. I'm leaning 10-2 on that one. But that's still an over. I'm still liking the over on 9.5, though. That's the thing.
Yeah. I think the over should be like it's definitely more likely than not. And I think, when you talk about like uncertainty, I think like
props to Texas Homer for pulling that one up.
Thank you.
That's why he's the best right there. I didn't even have that prepared for the show, and he just pulled it up for us.
I do think that like there's a lot of uncertainty with like every team in college football next year. Like everybody's turning over talent.
Georgia, Alabama.
Alabama. They're all losing their quarterbacks. Ohio State lost their quarterback. Ohio State lost like everyone. So I mean, and the twos might be as good as the ones. Like Sark says a lot with Texas, but you just don't know. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty next year. Who knows what happens, but I do think that Texas covers. I think they'll probably lose to Georgia, though. I will say.
Yeah, that on the road, I think that's kind of an experience Texas fans you haven't quite seen yet. It's a little different than going at Iowa State and at Baylor. No offense to my alumni, but I think I think at Georgia between the hedges is a really tough. That's like a real SEC experience. That is and the swamp too. People expect we're gonna get into that later. Talking about DJ Lagway because On3 listed their top 25 quarterbacks today. But if Florida's even as good as they were this year, they just went 8-5. That's still a hard game to play at in the swamp. So they're gonna get the real SEC experience as much as the detractors will tell you Texas has played no one in the SEC yet.
Especially with Florida. I mean, they came on really strong that second half of the season.
Yes,
with
sir.
Lagway starting. So, yeah, he'll be a problem. And you didn't even start against us. I think that's kind of why we whipped him so bad. So,
yeah. Hey, well, thanks for joining again, Johnny. A regular at this point. You want to shout out your Instagram or anything like that?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Follow me under 60 Flicks on Instagram, Twitter, all the social medias, you name it. So, thanks for having me on, James.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Johnny, for coming on again.
Okay.
All right, we've got another caller to talk about the over-under win total. Another regular at this point, Mr. Gerald Hopkins. Can you hear me?
How are we doing?
Oh, I'm great now, Gerald. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Will you remind me what is the over-under?
It's 9.5 for Texas.
I'm going slightly under. I think they finish right at 9-3.
And why do you think that?
Well, like you alluded, okay, who do you think were the top teams Texas played in the SEC this past year?
Georgia, for sure. A&M, technically. And shoot, I guess Florida. The SEC was a little weird this year because the third best team was technically Tennessee. Yeah, they skipped out on Alabama and Ole Miss, obviously. But, I mean, it was probably Florida and A&M were the next best behind Georgia.
With Florida's third string. So I personally, people can disagree, I don't think Texas got the top part of the SEC other than Georgia, who they couldn't figure out how to beat twice. With a first-year starting quarterback, I think everyone's expectations of Arch are sky high, and if they don't want to be disappointed, in my opinion, you should just hope for Arch to have about the same production as Quinn. Maybe have some other pieces, guys like Ryan Wingo really step up and make a difference. But, I mean, I think like OU was not good. Florida with their third string, who was a walk-on from Yale, and yeah, they smoked them. But Florida also kind of gained a ton of momentum the last couple games after that. I think they finished right at 9-3, which I'm sure a lot of Texas fans, if that were the case, would get fired up and kind of pissed about that. I don't think it would be bad considering you're going to start playing those upper tier programs within the SEC.
Yes.
Which again, I don't think is a bad thing. If they squeak out 10-2, you could still make the playoffs. Like,
yeah.
I don't think being the number 11 team in the playoffs is necessarily a bad thing. And if you don't make your conference championship game, like we saw with Oregon, you don't take a month break of not playing football. Like, I just think with a lot of fan bases, people are going to get fired up if, oh my God, we're not 11-1. What's going on? Arch is struggling. Arch is throwing a couple picks here and there. It's like, everybody calm down. If you just make the playoffs, like, it's fine. You don't have to be the 1 seed or the 2 seed or the 3 seed. And with a first-year quarterback, especially, with that last name, with the Heisman odds, which frankly kind of shocked me.
Hey, we'll get into that later. Yeah, there are some crazy Heisman odds.
Yeah, it's kind of it's weird. A lot of uncertainty, like we said, with a lot of teams. I did see something that Penn State is bringing a ton of dudes back, kind of like the Michigan script, where it's like
Ohio State even.
Back.
Ohio State brought everyone back this past year as well.
Yeah, and you saw how that worked, which that seems to kind of be a trend, is not necessarily going insanely portal heavy, I'm an Ole Miss guy.
Oh, you're an Ole Miss fan?
Live by the portal, die by the portal.
Yeah, you in Miami, you guys in Miami are kind of examples why you do not go all portal.
Yeah, and I mean, when you don't have oil money like Texas, you got to do with what you can. You got to do with what you got. But it's worked out. I mean, went from 5-7 to rattling off 3 back-to-back 10-win-plus seasons. But yeah, I mean, I think 9-3 would be a solid season for kind of the uncertainty around Texas. I still expect them to be one of those top 3-4 teams within the SEC. Has a great shot of making the playoffs, and if they exceed 9-3, think a lot of Texas fans would be happy, but I wouldn't necessarily be thinking 11-1 again
Yeah.
or whatever. But
Now, the thing is on that, Gerald, is if you looked at the schedule last year, you would have thought, at Michigan is tough. At A&M is tough. You would have thought a lot of OU is going to be tough. Now, the thing is, we expect OU to be better, but what if Georgia has a down year? Because there's uncertainty at quarterback. What if Ohio State is not as good as we think? Because they're also rebuilding. So I think we can sit here, and we will for the next 220 days, unfortunately. We will speculate. We will theorize. We will have all the hypotheticals in the world. But we really don't know who's going to be what. And, I mean, what if Florida just falls back down to earth and that's the end of Sunbelt and Billy? Who really knows? Now, the thing is, on paper right now, it is a harder schedule than this year. I'm not going to sit here and say that Texas didn't get off a little bit light because the SEC, frankly, was down this year. But yeah, I mean, you really just don't know until you know. And I think it'll be interesting, but that's kind of why my point is I think next year is not your title team. It's the year after that when all those players are established. They're juniors and seniors. Arch has gotten a year under his belt, but also it's year 3 in the system. So it's, Arch could come out hot. I do think we've seen when players sit for a little bit, like Garrett Nussmeier, you come in, the system, and like Arch also has a little bit of that gunslinger mentality, and he's a dual threat. So there will be more of that where like Arch is going to make plays on the fly that you could never imagine Quinn Ewers doing.
Exactly.
It just kind of, it depends. It's going to be fun for the ride. That's why I lean in sort of that 9-10 win window. If they only go 9-3, they're not making the playoff, which we know people, Texas fans will probably be upset about, but hopefully they'll have patience and realize like, hey, how happy are we that 9-3 is now the floor of Texas football, considering, they've really only been back up here for a couple of years now. Like, we've got to remember it's great that these are the problems that Texas has, and we're theorizing about 10 wins or 11 wins or 9 wins. Those are all first world problems, definitely, for a Texas program.
And if you go 9-3 and Arch says, hey, let's run it back, then you're really talking like, all right, these are the guys that are these are the guys that are supposed to probably take it. But I'd say probably right at 9-3, maybe 10-2. I think that win total is Vegas got that one, I think, pretty.
That's a fun line. Just like last year's 10.5. Like, that's a great line because you look at 9.5, and you're gonna get a lot of money on both sides of that for sure.
Yeah, I think it's solid.
All right, Gerald. Thanks for calling in again. Appreciate you being a regular.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you have a good night.
You too.
All right, guys. And on that note of talking about 2025. On3 released our dear friends at On3, as you see them right there in the corner. We love our boys up in Nashville. So they released their top 25 super early. They called it too early, which I would agree. But as we've said in the off season, this is what we do. We're going to get into theoreticals. We're going to talk. You're going to BS, sit around, shooting it with your friends, saying why you think this team is too high. This team is going to win this many games, whatever. We're going to do this in 7 months. Who the heck knows? I mean, that's the reality. Who the hell knows? Let's just go ahead and look at this top 25 from On3. So, hey, what do you know? Gerald and whoever else said Texas is going 9-3. Number 1, thanks to On3's too early top 25. I mean, this is fun to look at. They've got also Florida at number 9. They've got Ohio State at number 2, Oregon at number 3. There goes my light. We've got Texas at number 1. And now I personally think with that schedule, Texas is probably not your number 1 team in the country. But hey, they also have to start at Ohio State, which is just like, I mean, that is a crazy starting point for this team to have to walk into the shoe and start out your season, then still have to go play between the hedges at Georgia. That's why that's why these lines are what they are, because Vegas is betting on odds, and odds are, maybe Texas wins 1 of those games, but it's tough to win 3 of those games. Win in the Swamp, win at the shoe, win at Stanford Stadium and Athens. So, I mean, I just am of the belief that Texas is probably going to be around 10-2. and ranked in that sort of 8 through 12 range would be my guess. If I were a betting man, which I am not, because as we've discussed, I'm turning my light back on. As we've discussed, you cannot bet in the state of Texas. So anything I tell you here is just satire. But I like Texas to be kind of ranked in that 8 through 12 range. Now, I mean, Texas is, not overrated on this one. You've got Ohio State at 2. I think Ohio State's probably a 2-3 loss team. Totally unknown. They've lost their entire D-line. And then we've got South Carolina, Illinois at 7. Illinois did go 10-3, but they did not play many hard teams. They avoided Ohio State in their schedule. I don't think they played. No, they did play Penn State. Yeah, they lost to Penn State. I think Oregon too. But yeah, this is a fun thing to look at and just kind of theorize. How about Auburn at 11? I really do not agree with that one. And Indiana at 23. You never doubt Coach Sig, as we learned. That guy will use that for fuel if they're rated. They probably will be ranked that low. But hey, as again, I said, I kind of have that little bit of doubt on Texas. Them having to play at Ohio State. We do know what happened the last time they went to Ohio State. That was 20 years ago. And that this season upcoming will be the 20-year anniversary of the national title run. So maybe there'll be some magic in the air for Texas. I'm just being pessimistic. That's what we're supposed to do, is kind of pick things apart and be analytical and look at why we think things won't happen. But I think this list is just for fun's sake. And it's not the worst thing in the world. Those are pretty similar to the title odds, which had Texas at 2, Ohio State at 1, which, I do not think Ohio State is going to repeat. It's pretty rare for a team to have a national championship run with a first-year quarterback. Now you'll say Will Howard, that's the 5th-year guy. He transferred in, right? And you also had all your pieces around. As our last caller mentioned, he's an Ole Miss fan. Ole Miss goes too hard in the transfer portal. That doesn't really work. You try and portal in an O-line. Ohio State's O-line was bruised and beat up this year. They're losing a couple of those guys. Their D-line is totally out, So they'll have Caleb Downs back, though, of course, but Travion Henderson's gone. Quinshon Judkins is gone. I don't see Ohio State making a title run. I think it'll be one of those years where you're going to look and kind of like this year, you're going to go, Notre Dame's in the title, which before the season, you would not have expected that to happen. It'll probably be something like that. Thanks to the transfer portal, you don't necessarily have parity because the big boys are still eating more than the little guys. But because of that, now Georgia and even Texas and Ohio State and, all these teams, you lose kind of your second and third string guys in the portal now. And you just don't really have that ability to just throw bodies at people constantly. And we see when teams get injured, Ohio State's O-line struggled down the middle to the last part of the season down the stretch there. Their O-line was struggling. It's fun to look at, but I think in this era, it's pretty hard for a team to go back to back. Georgia was that was early portal era, 2021, 2022. And also they played TCU in the national title. So no offense to the Horned Frogs, but I just think it's pretty hard to go back to back these days, especially with a first year quarterback. And that is also kind of why I don't think Texas is necessarily going to be entitled, and they're still technically in title contention, but I don't think they're as serious of a threat as say this year or last year, just because it's all new. And that you can tell me I'm wrong, but I just think that's really hard to just throw in a bunch of new guys into the mix, especially the D-line, and expect to have, the same level of elite results like a 1-loss regular season. But hey, I willfully will be proven wrong if that is the case. And On3 had another top 25, and this is what we're going to finish the show on, guys, is On3 released their top 25 quarterbacks. And this one is really fun, especially if you remember our friend from Arizona State, Sam Leavitt, at number 1. That was really fun to see. If you watched Arizona State this year, he's a really good quarterback. Is he the best quarterback in the country? Probably not. But Sam Leavitt, he had 24 touchdowns, 6 INTs, 62% completion percentage. He was running all over Texas a little bit there. Looked like a Manziel light, like a Walmart Manziel against Texas. But I don't even think he's the most egregious one on the list. Drew Allar at 2. I think Drew Allar is what Drew Allar is. He's kind of similar to Quinn Ewers. He's not super mobile. He's going to put up about 25 touchdowns, a handful of picks, somewhat efficient, but, he doesn't necessarily do anything that wows you, especially when it comes to mobility. And then DJ Lagway, I'm not as high on Lagway as everyone else. I personally think if you're going to go off of just this season, this is obviously a projection. I believe Arch Manning is better than Lagway, hands down. And we're just having fun with these lists, obviously. No slights to our boys at On Three, but Lagway had 60% completion percentage. Arch was, let me see here, 68% for Arch Manning. And Lagway had 9 INTs. Arch, being the gunslinger that he is, only threw 2 INTs, right? And those were both against UL Monroe, I want to say. So I mean, Lagway, I believe, is overrated in my opinion. That's no dig on that guy. We were lucky to not face him and face the Yale transfer instead when they came into Austin this November. But he only had 100 yards rushing. People kind of like put him on this pedestal as an athlete. He's more of a pocket passer than he is an athlete. He had no rushing TDs, only 100 yards rushing. And you look at the Manning and you think, oh, Peyton Eli, this guy can't run. And then Arch, bust out 70-yard runs against UTSA. And Arch actually ran for 4 rushing touchdowns this year. He also had over 100 rushing yards. So, I mean, I like Arch over Lagway, in my opinion. This is really kind of an interesting list. I mean, Nico in the top 10. I think Nico is fully overrated. He threw like something like freaking 6 TDs against Power 5 opponents. Like he only had like 18 TDs this year, I believe. And most of them were against Kent State and the likes. But yeah, Arch Manning, weirdly underrated if you're going off of this list. I mean, Sam Levitt, I guess you could say is better than Arch because he's played more and threw for 24 TDs, and he actually ran for 5 TDs. He's a really good quarterback, as much as people dogged on him for his comments where he said he was better than Quinn. I don't see the world where Sam Levitt is the best quarterback in the country, but hey, it's a fun list. It's good. It gives us something to talk about, right? But yeah, I think Arch, of all these guys on the list, has the most upside. If this is all projection, I like Arch to be the best quarterback of this list. Now, the thing is like, who knows what people are going to play like. Cade Klubnik is a little low there, and I'm not just saying that because he's a Westlake boy. Diego Pavia, put a little respect on the Italian Manziel, the little meatball. We know how good he is playing against him. He somehow got another year of eligibility. Josh Hoover's really good at TCU. I don't know how much you've gotten to watch him. And also Taylon Green at 12 being ahead of Pavia. We played against Taylon Green. I mean, Taylon Green, a lot of potential. If you're going on potential, he might be the 12th best quarterback in the country. I don't really know what this list is. I think this is just off-season fun. Sawyer Robertson is also totally underrated. He threw for like 3,800 yards. Cade Klubnik at 8 is definitely a little low. I mean, he had 40 total touchdowns. This list is just kind of, I don't know. I think they're just spitballing. That's what everyone's going to be doing in the off-season. And yeah, that brings me into my last point about the Heisman odds. I'm not sure if you guys saw those, but Arch Manning, while he's not as good as DJ Lagway on that list, he does have the second best Heisman odds behind Garrett Nussmeier, who was 6th on that list. So yeah, this brings me to my opening point when I said Arch Manning for Heisman. Just had to say that for the algorithm, folks. So you would click on this video and we can throw it in the title now. We love Arch Manning. But Arch Manning is plus 950. Garrett Nussmeier is plus 900. Now, Nussmeier, the thing is like he is a total gunslinger. He is probably the version of Arch Manning you're trying to work out of him, hopefully, in practice. We don't want Arch Manning to be making throws like he did against UL Monroe. You're hoping that Arch Manning's making more reads, learning the offense a little better, and not being as totally gung-ho when he's out there, but you don't want him to be gun-shy, obviously. We want him throwing bombs. Arch throws bombs. Everybody knows that. But Nussmeier at plus 900, he's the favorite to win the Heisman, which is kind of crazy because he doesn't run. So Nussmeier threw 29 TDs and 12 INTs. He had negative rushing yards because just sack yarders. He's a pocket passer. That's the thing is Arch ran for over 100 yards, guys. If we're going to project into the season and just have fun with it, I think Arch is throwing, somewhere around 25 touchdowns. I think he'll have something similar to like a Quinn 2023 or 2022 when he first got in terms of passing yardage. But then Arch is a guy who can run for 450 yards and, 6-7 TDs. Why not? in the goal line package, that's definitely going to be a spot for him. So you've got Nussmeier at 1, Arch Manning at 2. So how about that? Texas is second in national title odds, and they have the second favorite to win the Heisman. Pretty good. I mean, these are things you would not have seen in previous years. It's nice to have Texas on those lists again with these expectations. Whether it happens or not, I don't think he's going to have the stats year one, Arch Manning, to win a Heisman. But I definitely think in the second year, when he's comfortable and he's started a year, that he will really have a chance to compete for a Heisman and put up those kind of crazy numbers. Now, if you guys want to call in and speculate, it's fun to, and talk about that quarterback list and Arch Manning for Heisman. I would love to hear what you guys have to say. But yeah, I'm kind of the belief that I don't think Arch Manning's going to do it in year one. I think year 2 is more where he'll get in his bag. His receivers will be more confident. I think Wingo should become an elite receiver. Khalil Lockett will be really great. Jamie French. So yeah, we'll see how things pan out. But it's hard for me to believe that a first-year starting quarterback, it's been a while since that has happened. I mean, most of these guys that are winning the Heisman now, aside from Travis Hunter, which who could have speculated, when you're picking the Heisman, you might as well just throw a dart at the Vegas odds and just be like, that one. Because we know people pick Jalen Milroe. I was a Jackson Dart guy. After 3 games, I thought Quinn Ewers was going to win the Heisman. And then who would have speculated that Travis Hunter would have done all that, paired with them actually being a competitive team? So yeah, I mean, I don't know. Nussmeier's your top, and then it's Manning, then it's Cade Klubnik, then it's Drew Allar. I do not see Drew Allar winning it. Klubnik could be interesting, but who knows? I mean, Manning, I think you might see him get invited in his redshirt junior year. Just probably not next year, in my opinion. As we've seen with quarterbacks recently, it's like Cam Ward. It's these guys in their 5th year. It's Jaden Daniels. So that's typically what it is. Dylan Gabriel got invited. It's 5th and 6th year guys who have really picked up on the college game and are very cerebral at that point and kind of have a mental edge on their competition. But yeah, we're going to go ahead and bring in our last caller here. We've got Mike. Mike, can you hear me?
Yeah. Hey, James.
What do you think about these Arch Manning Heisman odds and that top 25 quarterbacks list?
Yeah, I mean, I think Arch Manning actually has a pretty good chance to win the Heisman,
In his first year starting?
I don't think it's that crazy because you're bringing in what do they have, like 3 5-star receivers coming in, or maybe 2 5-star receivers in. One guy's close to being a 5-star. Then you have, of course, Wingo. Wingo is so explosive. He can really just take the top off of the defense. Like, Quinn just kind of had golden because of the injuries they had at the receiver. And also, Quinn just wasn't really the same quarterback after he got injured. He's after the Michigan game early. It was a Yo Monroe game when he got injured.
UTSA.
Yeah, UTSA game. I think this offense is capable of a lot more, especially with Arch Manning, the running element he brings to the table. Like, if you go and you get like 10 rushing touchdowns, you throw 30-something passing touchdowns, like that's probably good enough to win the Heisman.
That's true.
But I didn't really have a problem with like Sam Levitt being number 1. He had a really good year, and they did have.
You think Sam Levitt will be the best quarterback in the country?
I don't think it's that crazy. He was really damn good last year. He almost beat Texas with their number 1 receiver was out.
That was Scatterbo, dude. Scatterbo carried that.
Well,
team.
he made some good throws too, and he juked some Anthony Hill out in open space.
Yeah, he was making Anthony Hill and Trey Moore run across the field to cover him, like when he was scrambling.
Yeah, he's pretty fun to watch, and he'll have Jordan Tyson back. He had his number 1 receiver. He wasn't even playing in that game. They couldn't really throw it to any of the receivers. They couldn't get open. So I think the bigger was like Nico. I watched Nico. Yeah,
Nico being top 10 is kind of nuts to me.
I watched Nico against Alabama, and he missed like 6 deep ball touchdowns. I felt like it was insane how many he was just missing. No wonder that little Squirrel guy decided to transfer.
Oh, Squirrel White?
Yeah.
Where did Squirrel White go?
I'm not sure. But what Lagway was 3. Lagway's
Lagway being ranked as the 3rd best quarterback to me.
I've been hearing a lot of hype about him. Yeah. People are talking about him like he's like Cam Newton or something. I watched him. I mean, he's like promising, but
he's not as athletic as Cam Newton either.
He's like Dylan. He had like the same type of year as Raiola, and I think they saw Raiola was like 23 or something like that. So I don't know. I don't really understand. The list is pretty funny.
Yeah, I think it's more so just made for fun. Like when you're talking, we're week 1 of the offseason, you're kind of just like, And I know I'm in the social media game. We just do it. Sometimes you just do something for a little more engagement and a little less substance in reality. But yeah, Lagway's even been compared to Sam Ellinger, and I think Sam was a better athlete than DJ Lagway, in my opinion. I mean, Lagway only rushing for 100 yards. He played in damn near 10 games. So, I mean, Arch is a better athlete than him.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Probably John Mateer. We played John Mateer this year. He's way scarier than.
Oh, yeah.
Lagway,
John Mateer at OU, that could be interesting, but their O-line probably won't be that good.
Yeah, I mean, OU ain't competing for the SEC or anything like that. But
nope. Why'd they even come?
I don't know. Thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, thanks for calling in, man. All right, guys. That is a show, except one last thing. Texas does have a basketball game this weekend. It's the first time we will ever mention basketball, and maybe the last time, depending on what y'all say in the comments. But they're playing A&M, so you got to care slightly. Yeah, I mean, Texas basketball, Trey Johnson, that's the main story. A&M's ranked. Maybe you'll go, maybe it won't. But we know you're here for Inside Texas football. But we'll tune in because it's fun to watch a Lone Star Showdown in whatever the sport is. And we'll probably cover that a little bit for you guys. But make sure you're following Inside Texas on Instagram, on Twitter as well. We put a lot of cool stuff on there. And give me a personal follow at Jamerson Hayden if you're feeling generous. And make sure to subscribe, guys, right there. Subscribe so I can make this my full-time job. Help me chase my dream. I just graduated from college. I'm loving this stuff. They're nice enough to let me do it, and I appreciate y'all coming along and calling in. We're going to do some fun stuff in the offseason and let you guys call in more. So please like the show, share the show, drop a comment if you enjoy it. Tell me what you think about my opinions, how wrong I am. And, yeah, make sure to subscribe. Grab your girlfriend's phone. Grab your mom's phone. Get on the YouTube app and subscribe to Inside Texas. It really helps us out. It's free. And, you know, hey, they're never going to know. It doesn't do anything. You just subscribe. You probably won't ever see it again if you don't want to. But thank you so much for coming along, guys. I really do appreciate it. This was a fun one. I'm surprised we were able to go an hour, considering there is not much news going on in the offseason. But, hey, we figured it out. Now I have to try and find where the end bumper is. All right, make sure to subscribe and like. Thank you to Texas Homer. Thank you to all the callers. Everyone have a great night. God bless.